Ladies and gentlemen, we are under attack. Our very way of life, our very existence is threatened. They have already taken over Washington. They continue to destroy our Constitution. It is time to take back our country now.
The Wise Conservative Show, bringing wisdom back to politics.
Ladies and gentlemen, broadcasting officially for the very first time on the Youth Revolt channel, the Youth Revolt podcast, I am pleased to welcome you to the Wise Conservative. My name is Dakota Wise, and today I'll be your host. So, I want to clarify something because it might be a little bit confusing, especially for those of you who have not listened to our podcast before and are hearing us for the very first time on the Youth Revolt channel. Now, my name is Dakota Wise, and I am co-hosting this podcast with my younger brother. His name is Connor Wise. So we are both hosting the Wise Conservative. Generally, we each have a show once a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays is when our podcast officially is uploaded. I wanted to clarify that. Unfortunately, this week he's had some prior obligations, so I am taking both of the shows. But generally, you will find my uploads on Tuesdays and his uploads on Thursdays, both under the name of the Wise Conservative. Now that we've got that out of the way, in light of the recent events that have happened with the FBI and Apple, I want to do a show and talk about the price of security and whether or not we actually need to have the conversation about how much as Americans we are actually willing to give up our liberties, give up our personal privacy in the name of security, because that's a fundamental balance that a country must decide upon. We have to fundamentally decide whether or not we are willing to give up personal freedom, personal privacy in security of the state. And so that hasn't really been a conversation that's happened up until now. And we've already started to give up some of our personal liberties and freedoms to keep us safe from supposed terrorism in the name of stopping terrorism. But in light of the events with Apple and some of the really alarming stances I've seen taken by people within our party, I wanted to do a show on freedom versus security. Because fundamentally, you have to find a balance of the two. You can't have full freedom and full safety. You have to give up one in order to achieve the other. So obviously, it's a balancing act. But we have the federal government issuing court orders to a private company in order to develop software that would hinder the security features of the private company. Now that's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. And what I find crazy is how many people, especially in our party, the Republican Party, are willing to boycott. You have Trump issuing a boycott on Apple. Are willing to boycott a company because they're standing for their security. Okay, I have no problem with the FBI having a search warrant and getting into a phone. That's fine. They have a search warrant, totally cool. But the problem is, and obviously they have search warrants like crazy for anything involved with the San Bernardino shooters. But the problem right now is not the fact that they're trying to search the phone. The problem is that they're trying to get a private company to essentially make their encryption of their devices useless. Okay? Because encryption exists exactly for this reason. So nobody except the owner can get into it. Now, whether or not that poses a threat to security, essentially not really, because the FBI is trying to get into this phone so that they can see quote-unquote contacts, so that they can see whatever was going on, okay? But they already have call logs. They already can see who and when they text messaged, okay? So if this phone was being used to contact anyone of questionable character or ethics, They would already know that. They could see it in the call logs. They could see it in the text messages that were sent. Okay, so in reality, this is being used as a scapegoat by the FBI, by the federal government, in order to wage their battle against encryption. We've seen this question come up multiple times in Republican debates over the last year. Not just Republican debates, but just in general. The federal government has been trying to get backdoors into encryption for years now. Ever since Snowden's allegations came out, private companies have stepped up security, essentially to prevent government from illegally spying on citizens. But we've seen that the federal government has for years been trying to get Silicon Valley to let them into their encryption. Okay, and so when Apple comes out and they have their devices encrypted, Apple can't get into them, the government can't get into them, only the person who owns the device can. That pisses off the federal government, right? Because they want to be able to get into anything whenever they want. Just look at the NSA. That's all the evidence you need that statement is true. So when you have this device that the federal government cannot get into, it really pisses them off, okay? And they've been trying to wage war on this encryption for years now. And they found the perfect opportunity in order to deal a blow to the encryption movement. If they can use this, say that they're investigating terrorism in a very prominent case, something that angers a lot of Americans, then yeah, they're going to have a lot more public support. It's like if you look after 9/11, okay? Initially, everyone was on board with the Patriot Act. Republican, Democrat, Independent, it didn't matter. Nobody stopped to think, hold on, this might not be such a good idea. Okay, they're invoking the same response from the San Bernardino shooting, trying to essentially put an end to this encryption movement that has developed out of Silicon Valley. And this phone provides the perfect scapegoat. So a lot of you sitting at home are probably sitting there wondering, because this is a conservative podcast, right? So there's probably a lot of you who disagree with what I'm saying, think Apple should just turn over, develop this software, and give it to the FBI. That just seems to be the prominent opinion in our party. A poll done by CNN found that 43% of the population agreed with what Apple was doing. So the majority of people think that Apple should develop a software to hinder their own encryption useless. Okay, so right there, we can already see that for a lot of the American people, okay, I don't think, number one, that they're thinking of what issues might arise from having a software that essentially renders the encryption useless. So besides the fact that the government would be able to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and quite frankly, I don't trust the federal government, so right there, that's a reason to not develop the software. But number two, once you have software like this, it's only a matter of time. A matter of time before it gets out somewhere. Foreign governments, criminal rings, hackers. It's only a matter of time, right? It happens no matter what. Once something is developed, it will be leaked. Guaranteed it. Guarantee it. Okay? So that's number two. Number three, I think it is fundamentally wrong to have a private company being forced to develop software on their own dime. Not that Apple really has to worry about financial issues, but nonetheless, on their own dime to render their products feature useless. That's just fundamentally not how the United States government and the United States economic ideals, values, that's just not how the United States works, okay? And so the only reason that people are even considering this being a reasonable request is because the population is scared. ISIS is growing. ISIS is strong. ISIS has capabilities to attack countries. The American people are scared because ISIS and the threat of terrorism has been allowed to grow under this administration. the government, the federal government, is playing on these people's fears. You cannot give up personal liberties, personal privacy, okay? I'm going to throw something out there. It's totally normal for people to not want the federal government to be able to get into their files. And 99% of those people have nothing to hide. Nothing. But fundamentally, and I believe this, fundamentally, it's my privacy, okay? Just out of fundamental values. I encrypt my laptop, I encrypt my phone. I do that so that no one, the government, hackers, whoever wants into it, can't get to it. Because in this digital era that we live in, everything is tracked, everything is monitored. You'd be crazy if you actually believed that the NSA isn't keeping track of everything we do on the internet. There's no personal privacy in this modern era full of technology. But you can ensure that if your the hardware itself falls into someone's hands, encryption is the only way that you have any possibility of them not being able to extract every bit of data off of that. So then a lot of people say, if you have nothing to hide, then it really shouldn't matter if you have encryption or not. It really shouldn't matter if the government wants to look at you or not. But that has to be one of the most un-American ideas that I have heard thrown around in a long time, and that's coming from the Republicans, the neocons in our party. Okay, that's not what the founding fathers set up when they established this government. Okay, they could have said, you know what, it's not a problem if troops are housed in people's houses, they have nothing to hide, so we're going to allow quartering of troops. Okay, but they didn't. They had the foresight to think that, you know, maybe we want to live in a country where personal liberties and personal freedoms outrank trying to provide safety, because up until now, the NSA, and this is coming from Senator Rand Paul, the NSA has not stopped any terrorist act, not once. Yet they collected metadata from everyone, yours, mine, everyone's phone. They track our internet. They do anything they can to get as much data on you as possible. Why? It really brings up the question of why they really continue to collect all this data and track everything. Well, to be honest, there's not a lot of answers that don't sound like a conspiracy theory. There's really not. And there's really no reasonable reason that they continue to do this. And that they're so quickly willing to give up our personal liberty and personal security and privacy in the name of freedom, or in the name of safety. There's really no reason that they should be doing this. Yet it seems to be the one thing that both parties can agree upon. But that's not really conservative ideals and values when you get down to it. Conservative ideals and values should be valuing our security, or our privacy. They should be valuing our civil liberties. They should be valuing the Fourth Amendment when the NSA is unconstitutionally searching everyone, okay? And it all comes down to this. I don't have a problem with the NSA, with anyone collecting data from people who have a search warrant. That's how it used to work. You'd go to a judge, the judge would issue a search warrant, and you could do all of this. But we now live in a society where that whole process is sidestepped, and they just collect whatever they want, whenever they want, and try to analyze it for trends. That's all they do, okay? So here's my solution. Get a search warrant. That's all you have to do, and I'm perfectly okay with this. Get a search warrant, number one, and when it comes to Apple, don't require a company to render their own product useless. The FBI is full of smart people, probably some of the smartest in the world. But they cannot develop their own software? No, that doesn't make any sense. They need to develop their own software, number one, if they want to have software like that. Number two, you can't require a private company to do it. That just doesn't make any sense. It's not American, and it sure as hell is not conservative ideals or values. 1984, Brave New World. All those dystopian novels are surprisingly accurate, and they were not supposed to be a manual on how this country is run. Just think about that. We'll be right back with the Wise Conservative Show. Don't go anywhere.
The idea behind Youth Revolt is to let them, these liberal professors, let them know that we are here and we're ready to fight.
Youth Revolt. Speak without fear.
I told you guys we would be right back. So what I have in front of me, I'm looking at Senator Rand Paul's annual waste list, which is essentially a list of items the United States federal government is spending obscene amounts of money on stuff that promotes absolutely nothing, no improvement for the American people, yet you and I are paying for it with our tax dollars. So I want to talk about just a few of the craziest examples that are on this list. Starting first off, number one, $6 million spent on a campaign, a advertisement campaign to promote tourism in Albania. Albania. Now, I'm not sure where the $6 million was going. I haven't received my pamphlet on why I should take a vacation to Albania. I'm not even sure, honestly, where Albania is, but apparently it's important enough for the United States federal government to be spending $6 million of your money trying to get people to vacation there. Now, number two on the list is a $43 million gas station in Afghanistan. Now, I'm not exactly sure how it could cost $43 million to build a gas station, especially when I'm assuming, I don't know this as a fact, but I'm assuming gas is pretty damn cheap in Afghanistan because they're literally sitting in the world's biggest oil fields. Okay, so $43 million to build a gas station. There is no way in hell that Chevron, that any other any of those gas companies, they do not spend $43 million a gas station. So why the hell are we spending $43 million to build a gas station in Afghanistan? A $15 million grant, $15 million of your money, going to allow a golf club manufacturer to do research in space. Right, because that really benefits the public. It's insane, absolutely insane, where some of our tax dollars are going. Just recently, this year we passed a $4.1 trillion spending deal. And people are like, oh, how can we be spending that much money? Ladies and gentlemen, wake up. It is right here in front of you. This is just a few of the examples of waste and fraud going on within our federal government. And these are the projects, these are the reasons that is driving us to bankruptcy court. We don't have money to spend as it is, okay? We owe $19 trillion in debt. Yet we are spending millions and millions of dollars on these absolutely asinine projects, these asinine research grants. All of this needs to go. We don't have money to be spending, okay? We also spent $15.6 million to cover foreign students' college tuition. Now, this one really gets to me, okay? We have students here in the United States who don't get full financial aid, who could really use extra help, okay? That's why we have the whole Bernie Sanders rising thing occurring. But we're going to spend almost $16 million to cover the tuition of foreign students. There's something fundamentally wrong when a country is willing to accommodate others before they ensure that everyone in the United States is covered first. That's really plays into the whole role with illegal immigration that I won't even get to because it seems like I go on a rant about that every show. But, ladies and gentlemen, $16 million to cover foreign students' college tuition instead of American students. Okay? Moving on. $175 million. This is a big one. $175 million to cover a study on sleep apnea that was apparently riddled with fraud. They knew it had fraud from the start. They knew the money wasn't all going to the study, yet they continued to spend money on it. They continued to cover it in the budget. Cost Americans $175 million. Absolutely nothing new, nothing groundbreaking came out of the study. It was known it was riddled with fraud. Nobody put an end to it. Here's a great one. $450,000 grant to produce games that focus on climate change. Right there, that is the reason we are going bankrupt. Because who the hell, number one, what are they thinking? Who the hell wants to play a game focused on climate change? Number two, that's not the government's job to be promoting things like this. They should not be spending our money on non-essential items like this. When again, we're $19 trillion in debt. And people go, gee, I wonder why. Look these things up, people. Look at where your tax dollars are going. Okay? We spent $25,000 building a laundromat for the U.S. Forest Service. $25,000. There's no way in hell that a laundromat that a private company is building is that expensive. They would never be profitable. That right there, that goes to prove that you have all these people who are saying we need the government to provide health insurance. We need the government to provide free education. Why? They spend ridiculous, insane amounts of money on something the private industry can do 100 times more efficiently and for 1,000 times cheaper. $43 million on a gas station. $25,000 on a laundromat. Come on, people. Okay? We spent $380,000 to investigate the freshman 15. Really? You know why the freshman 15 exists? Because number one, people are away from their parents, they don't eat healthy, they don't exercise because freshmen are overwhelmed. Bam! I could have just made $380,000 because that's essentially what the study found. Yet we spent that much money on it, taxpayer money, okay? $15,000 for a grant to hold a conference on balding. Now this is a big one because if you look at all those politicians, probably 3/4 of them are balding. That one might be worth it in the end. But seriously, people, seriously. When you sit down and actually look at where our tax dollars are going, it is frightening how much of it is going to waste, to fraud, to useless studies, to, cover foreign students' tuition. We're borrowing money at insane amounts from foreign countries. Insane amounts. Yet, we're still sending financial aid to other foreign nations. So we're borrowing money to send to other places. Meanwhile, we hold the interest. And our debt continues to grow. We have not been able to balance a budget in decades. We're $19 trillion in debt, people. At some point, that's going to have a catastrophic effect on our economy and our ability as a nation to actually conduct business with others. At what point are other nations going to wake up and say, damn, these Americans are never going to pay us. They already owe $19 trillion. We're never going to get our money. And I don't know what's going to happen when countries start to wake up and realize that that's the truth. But it won't be good for us. It won't be good for our economy. We need to stop. We need to stop. And I use this analogy a lot, but it really is the perfect analogy. Okay? The American people, every family is expected to live within their means. You spend more money than what you have, you go broke, you go bankrupt, your credit rating Your credit score, all of that is hurt for, like a decade after. Okay? The American family is expected to balance a budget. Yet we, the people, which fund the government, and the government is supposed to be by the people, of the people, and for the people, they're not expected to abide by the same rules. We've allowed them to continue to spend asinine amount of money on useless projects, useless things. You want to start balancing a budget, it's easy. How about you start getting rid of these useless examples of waste that I just gave? Okay? And yes, we have a $4.1 trillion budget. And what I listed maybe amounts to $500 million. Maybe. A little under, probably. But it's a start, and those are just a few of the examples of waste. Okay? And so every year, Senator Rand Paul, great guy. Honestly, my favorite politician out there because he gets it. He understands that this debt is the most crippling problem we face. And he comes up with this list of waste and fraud every year. And every year, the Senate ignores it. They don't do a thing about it. And it's your money. It's my money. It's the American people's money that is being put to waste on projects that do not affect us and do not matter to us. And it continues to cause us to reach further and further into debt. And yet we have our generation, the millennials. They're sitting here supporting people like Bernie Sanders, who not the Washington Post, who was it? I think it was the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. One of the two. They actually conducted a study and found that Bernie Sanders' policies would add an additional $18 trillion of debt over the course of a decade. Over one decade, we would pretty much double our debt based on Bernie Sanders' new policies alone. That doesn't take into account the amount of debt we would accrue from the spending we have now. So we would more than double our debt under Bernie Sanders' presidency. And the scary thing is that the millennial generation doesn't seem to give a shit. They don't seem to care. And it's going to be our generation, mark my words. It will be our generation that pays the consequences for this crippling, because that's what it's going to become, this crippling debt. When we have a government that's not able to function because they have no money, it's going to affect every American. So that's why every American should care. Every American should know where our money's going, and we shouldn't be funding these projects that give absolutely nothing back to the American people. Of course, you're the one person who might have taken a vacation to Albania, but the rest of us, that $6 million was a waste. We don't need a $43 million gas station in Afghanistan, and I really don't care that a golf club maker did research in space, and it definitely shouldn't have received $15 million. But right there, that's your federal government hard at work, wasting your hard-earned tax dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, that just about wraps up our show. Seems like I go on a rant on the budget crisis every show, but it really is a big deal. People seem to ignore it because it's not the flashiest or the most fun story. It doesn't get good ratings. But you could even venture to say that it's a bigger threat to the United States than ISIS. Obviously not a physical threat, but it's a huge threat. It's number 1 or 2 on the list of things we should be talking about. Yet it continues to be ignored by politicians and by the media, because politicians just like to spend money, and the media just likes to get ratings, and talking about the budget doesn't do either of those. So that is why we talk about it here. But that brings us to our 30 minutes just about. Really thinking about increasing the length of these shows. It goes so quickly. I have so much to talk about because there's just so much crazy stuff going on. So, I look forward to increasing the length of our show here in the next few weeks. Starting next week, we should be back to our normal schedule with Connor doing one of these shows. We're still debating on if he will do Tuesday or Thursday. We just have to kind of take a look at our schedules and see. But I've had a great time hosting these shows this week. Once again, we are broadcasting for the first time on the Youth Revolt podcast, or the Youth Revolt channel. We are very, very, very grateful to Jason Veely for allowing us this great opportunity. Go ahead and check out youthrevolt.org. Website's up. It's great. You're going to love what you see. The revolution has started, and we will take back our classrooms. Thank everyone. I want to thank everyone. There we go. So much for listening in. Follow us on Spreaker.com/TheWiseConservative. Stay safe, America, and God bless you all.